If you're a landlord and you're using Venmo, Zelle, Cash App, or anything like that to collect rent, you're leaving money on the table in your rental business. In this video, I'm gonna go over my 6 non-negotiable features of any rental collection tool and tell you which one I'm using now and why. My name's Hussein, and I've probably collected rent over a dozen different ways over the last decade, and I'm excited to share what I've learned. Let's get into it. Feature number 1 of any rental collection tool, and the big reason I don't recommend Venmo or Cash App, is automatic late fees. This one is huge. I'm gonna share a common scenario for me and you tell me if you can relate. Rent is due on the 1st. If it's not due by the 5th, it's late. The 5th comes around, that one pesky tenant doesn't pay, but instead of sending them a late rent notice, they're like, oh, they're gonna pay, and by the 7th or something, they pay. And they do that like every month or every other month. And it's just like, well, what's the point of sending them the notice? They're gonna pay me anyway. That's leaving money on the table. After the 5th or whatever your grace period is, that late fee should automatically be applied. You shouldn't have to be the one initiating it to waste your time doing that. You also don't want to be the bad guy. That should just automatically kick in and everybody should know that that late fee is due. I have tenants that still pay me via check, and I have a bunch of tenants that pay me on an automated system, and I've had these people side by side, and I'm telling you, you're making more money on the one side when those late fees are automatically being applied. Even if it just happens once a year, twice a year, over a couple different tenants, it's just putting money in your bank account. Feature number 2 of any rental collection tool that I use is it has to be free. And that's probably one of the reasons you like Venmo or Zelle or Cash App, is it's both free to the landlord and free to the tenant. So when you look at the different ways to collect rent online, usually you're faced with one of 2 fees. So fee number 1 is there's like a monthly fee as the landlord to use the software, or fee number 2 is there's no monthly fee, but there could be a transaction fee, either that the landlord has to pay or the tenant has to pay, but somebody has to pay a transaction fee each time, and that is annoying. So just to be clear, we're just talking about rent collection tools. Some of those paid things that I mentioned are softwares that have full-blown property management features. Those may or may not make sense depending on the number of units that you have, but here we're just talking about rent collection, and I think that part should be free. Feature number 3, a rent ledger that is available both to the landlord and the tenant. So this doesn't sound like it's that big of a deal, but a rent ledger will clearly state what is due at any time, what's been paid, and when that's visible to the tenant, it just makes the disputes or the discussions about what's owed and what's not owed very clear. And with most of these systems, you can add things on there. So if you want to give them a rent credit for some reason, you can add that on. They owe you something extra. So let's say you have a clause for like maintenance where if it's like their fault or something, they have to pay something extra. You can add that on, and there's no dispute of what's owed. When it's time to pay rent, that amount is right there for them. Next, automatic rent payment notifications for your tenants. This one, again, is huge. So with these systems, when rent is coming due, a couple days or whatever the system decides, it will say, hey, rent is coming due, make sure to make your payment or set up auto payment. Again, this is another one of those things where over the last decade, I've had tenants on a payment system that will give them the automatic rent notifications, and I've had tenants that are not on that system that are paying me check or something else. And time again, the people who are signed up for those rent notifications pay me on time consistently, much more frequently than the other tenants. Number 5 is a system that allows multiple tenants to pay. So in a roommate situation, so let's say you have 2 tenants living in one unit, a good rent collection tool, when tenant A pays you their half, that should notify tenant B that this amount is still due. And then at the end of the month, that should notify everybody if rent is paid fully or if everybody gets a late fee, and that shouldn't be managed by you. Again, a system should be doing that for you. Non-negotiable feature number 6 is a rental collection tool that allows a credit card option. So I want to increase the likelihood that a tenant will pay me, and a big way to do that is to increase the number of payment options that they have, and having a credit card as a payment option is a big one, and not all rental collection tools will allow you to do that. I mean, ironically, I think like Venmo and Cash App, you can throw a credit card in there, but once you get to the other online rental collection tools, there are some that just don't allow a credit card. So that one, again, over the last 10 years has been a big one for me. So right now, I think the best online rent collection tool is apartments.com. This video isn't sponsored by apartments.com. There's no affiliate link or anything. I don't get any money for recommending apartments.com. I just think it's the best free alternative to Zelle, Venmo, Cash App, and that type of stuff. There are some other free online rent collection tools like Stessa.com, Avail, Zillow.com is free, but they're missing one of those 6 features that I mentioned above, so that's why I still recommend apartments.com. Diving into apartments.com, this is what my page looks like. You can see that they offer other things besides payment. They have all these other features, but I'm particularly just using it for the payment feature. You can see the different tenants and units are listed here. You can see the current balance they owe you, what their monthly rent is, the next time it's due, when they paid you last. You can see in this one in particular, they have a negative balance because I actually had to issue them a credit, and that's something I did directly from the software. I just had to hit add credit. If you wanted to see the tenant's ledger that I mentioned before, that's available for both the tenant and the landlord, you can hit view all transactions. And once you're in here, you can see you have the upcoming and in progress transactions at the top here. You can see the completed transactions and all the dates here. And again, this is available to both you and the tenant, so there's never a dispute about what's owed, when it's owed, that whole thing. One of my non-negotiable features was rent payment notifications. So in apartments.com, we can take a look and see the different type of notifications that the renter will get. So they will obviously get a notification when you invite them to apartments.com to sign up. They'll get something saying your rent is due if they did not set up payment. So it'll say, let's set up your payment. They'll just get a general one that says your rent is coming due. They'll get one that says, hey, your rent is due today, avoid a late fee. And if they don't pay, they get one that says the late fee has automatically been added. And then again, if you make any changes to their ledger, so let's say you add a credit or a bill they owe you, or you're just recording, let's say sometimes they're signed up for apartments.com, but they'll send you a check anyway. You can record that right in their ledger. And this is available to both you and the tenant. So that's pretty neat. So every software system has drawbacks. These are the 2 drawbacks for apartments.com that come to mind. Number 1, when a tenant pays you, it takes like 3 to 5 days for that rent to show up in your bank account. The moment they pay you, you know that the rent is coming, but for it to show up in your bank account could be up to 5 days. However, if you need the tenant's rent money to pay your bills immediately, and that 5 days is a deal breaker for you, I think you may have another problem in your rental business and may need to work on your reserves or something like that. For me personally, I just want to know the rent is coming, and that 5 days doesn't bother me at all. Drawback number 2, and this will be a drawback for whatever new software system you recommend, is asking somebody to sign up for another login with a password. Sometimes can have a little bit of resistance behind it, particularly with apartments.com. In order for it to be 100% free, the tenant has to link their bank account. So sometimes they can do that instantly, and sometimes it can take a couple days to do the deposits and that whole thing. And because of that, that is the one time when you're doing the initial move-in fees that I will take a different form of payment, like Cash App, Zelle, personal check, is when they're paying their security deposit and that initial move-in. Sometimes I want to get that payment right away and I don't want to wait for them to sign up, verify their bank account, and do that whole jazz. Again, sometimes it verifies instantly, so it's not a big deal, but that's the one use case for Venmo, Cash App, and Zelle, at least in my business. So even if you get the best online rental collection tool, I promise you, you will still have tenants that want to pay you via check, and they're good tenants. So in that scenario, what I recommend is a virtual mailbox service with automatic check depositing. If you want to learn all about that, I have a video about what a virtual mailbox is, why I recommend it for receiving all my paper mail, and how it can fit into your business. So I would check out that video next.